Okay. So, okay. Good evening. I'm going to start off with a disclaimer. The disclaimer is that even though I've barely been outside, I went to shul this morning, I went to shul this afternoon, and I ran outside for 2 minutes. The heat seems to be sucking the energy out of me today. Yes, I am drinking tons of water. Um, and I found myself this afternoon like a dish rag, just kind of laying there. So I have found over the years, it's interesting that when I'm tired or just not up to it, when you start to teach, you start to learn, it kind of gives you life. It's Chaim Hila Chazikim Ba. And this is a good example, hopefully, tonight of that. Okay, so where are we right now? We've got a few psukim into Perek Bet in Nehemia, about two or three psukim in. What I want to do is, before we get into more depth of this chapter, it's a short chapter, it's 20 psukim. I just want to read through it because we only read part of it so far to get the whole picture of this chapter, then go back and pick up some of the information that I'd like to share with you this evening. So again, we're going to kind of read through Perek Bet, chapter 2 in Nehemia. And we know it was just introduced at the very end of the first chapter that Nehemiah's job was in service to the king as his wine steward, which we mentioned that it was a very high profile, politically connected position, especially at that time of history. It says, I took the wine, I gave it to the king, and I had never been in a bad mood, so to speak, in front of him, which also meant that if he had a bad day, not having to do with anything Yerushalayim, and he just, his kids gave him trouble one day. He didn't show it when he was in front of the king. But one day, why is it that you look so bad? You're not sick. It must be you're just having, now there's multiple ways to translate this. It could be an evil heart, you have bad thoughts, evil intentions. Va'ira harbe me'od. And I was really afraid. So Nehemiah is telling us that the first impression the king has of when he sees Nehemiah as being kind of off is not like, I'm sorry, you're not feeling good, you want to talk about it, but he's concerned that Nehemiah is actually looking to do something against the king. Kill him, overthrow him, take charge, whatever it might be. And I said to the king, so the first thing he does is he says what we would say in English, long live the king. How is it possible that I shouldn't be upset? That the city of the graves of my ancestors is laying in ruins, and its gates and consumed by fire. Okay, now the whole tone of the conversation changes. I'm just make a comment on that before I continue. I am sure that anyone hearing this, whether you're here live or you will hear this on YouTube, has been in a situation, I know I have, where someone comes one day, whether it's at work, in the street, in the show, wherever it may be, comes charging at you and saying, how could you, ba, 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 ba. And you listen, and then hopefully calmly, and you respond like, I don't know what you're talking about because that wasn't even me. And then they realize that they made a mistake in accusing you of something or thinking you had done something or said something. And it changes the conversation, it changes the tone instantly. I'll give you one example. It actually happened to me here. A few years ago, there was when the WhatsApp group for Pnei Shemuel was still open, meaning that anyone could post in it, there was a conversation that was going on. And rarely do I put my 2 cents in when it's a public discussion like that, because you can never win. And I said something. I actually just quoted a pasuk that I thought indicated something, which way the conversation should go. Somebody took it completely the wrong way, thought I was attacking him, and he messaged me privately, thankfully. He says, how can you say that? It was, why are you attacking me? I said, you missed the whole point. I was actually saying, you're right. And this is your proof. Oh, that's right. And we talked like 20 minutes after that. Yeah, he wanted his way of making up. So this is what happens here. The king has apparently accused Nehemiah of maybe potentially, I know why you're off, because you're probably thinking some bad things to do to me. And now the king says in Pasuk, Dalit, the king said to me, what is it you're asking for me or just wanting from me? What's your request? And I daven to Hashem. Again, this is all Nehemiah talking in first person. Hey, 5. And I said to the king, we already talked about this because we read the first few psukim before. This is a similar language that Esther Hamalka uses in the same basic part, I won't say palace, but in the same situation, same country. If I find favor in your eyes, Asher tishlacheni el Yehuda el ir kivrot avotai ve'evnena. Please give me, if I found favor in your eyes, give me my permission to leave, to go to Yehuda, to Judea, to the city of my ancestors' graves, and then to be able to rebuild it. He's not asking to just go. He's going there for a purpose. He's saying, I want to go for a reason. That's to rebuild. Now, why is that? Why was he so worried? Right? Why was he so worried? One of the questions we asked last week was, why did it take him, we're going to deal with that tonight. Why did it take him so long from the time that he was told about the breaches in the wall and how things are in bad shape till he actually takes action? It's a few months. We're going to look at two possibilities tonight. The other thing is, he's not proactive at all. He's reactive. Difference being, he doesn't go to the king after these months of time and say, by the way, my dear king, I need to talk to you about something. It only came out after the king, says, hey, what's up with you? But we're only going to deal with with the first question in a few minutes. So now the king says, in Vav, number 6, we're going to talk about this word shegal later, hopefully still tonight. Let's just talk about, let's say it's his, if you're familiar at all with the terminology in monarchy, it's called a consort. It could be his wife, it could be the queen, it could be a pilegish, it could be a whole bunch of things. We're going to take a look at that word. It's an interesting word. So the king, let's just say queen, and the queen sitting next to him said, okay, we hear you. How long are you going for? And when are you coming back? He doesn't give an answer. At least he does obviously give an answer. The Navi doesn't record it. And the king said, okay, cool. And he sent me on my way. I gave him a specific date. I gave him a time when we would come back, when I was going to come back. Why does he ask for a time? Obviously, because he doesn't want to send his way his butler, his wine steward, his confidant, whatever else he may be, for an extended period of time, because who knows what he might end up doing. And I said to the king, and if it's cool with you, please do me a favor. I need letters of passage. Why? Because we've seen this word before, pachot and pecha. And pecha was a governor. As he traveled from Persia to Israel, he would pass through in the kingdom of this king of Artaxerxes multiple municipalities, let's say, multiple countries, multiple cities, and each one had their region had a governor. And I need letters to show to these governors, these pechot, that are beyond the river, asher ya'aviruni, that they will give me passage. Ad asher avo el Yehuda, until I reach Yehuda. Chet, 8. V'igeret el asaf shomer hapardes asher lamelech. But in addition to the letters of passage, I need people to be able to give me the okay, for you to give me a letter, to okay me crossing through. There's something else I need from you. I need a letter specifically to a man named Asaph, who was the one who was in charge of what we're going to call the King's Park. That he should, we'll explain what that is a different night. We won't get that tonight. I need him to please be told from you to give me wood for the roof of the gatehouses of the Beit HaMikdash, the fortress of the Beit HaMikdash, and the city walls, asher avo elav, that I will I'm going to be in that city. I'm going to be in the house. Vayiten li melech kiyad Elokai atova alai. And a king gave me all these letters with thanks to Hashem for watching over me, so to speak. So in other words, this whole discussion begins with, well, we know he prayed in the last parak. The first parak, he davened to Hashem for help. And we only realized late in the game, in the tefillah, he was asking for Hashem's help, making sure that the king would listen to him. Now he comes before the king, or he doesn't come, he's with the king. The king asks him what's going on. He says the silent prayer. These prayers are answered. He gets what he wants. And again, he ends with a thank you to Hashem. It's very similar to not getting into details now, but the structure of Shemon Esrei. You start with praising the king. We start with praising Hashem. In this case, he thanked Hashem, and he also praised the king, lowercase k, but along with the king. He ends with a prayer of thanks of Todah. Hashem. Number 9. So then he starts out on his journey. Now, something that we don't see. If you're writing this, right? Let me read this puzzle. I'm going to ask you a question, open-ended question. And I came to these governors of the provinces beyond the river. And I gave them the letters of the king. In addition to the letters, the king also sent army officers with me and horses. What's missing? Doesn't tell us, like he did in Sefer Ezra, when it was told all the families that went with him, all the people that went with him. Did he go alone? Did he go with a lot of people? If he went with a lot of people, where are their names? Did he only go potentially with a handful of individuals from the king? We'll have to talk about that. Yud 10. Vayishmastan balat achoroni. These are, at least one of these two is very ambiguous as to who he is. This man's name is Sanballat. His name is going to come up a couple more times in Sefer Nehemia. There's a lot of discussion. We'll only look at a little bit of it when we get to it, as to who he really was. Was he Jewish? Was he not Jewish? Was he an enemy? Was he an enemy from within, an enemy from without? And this other man, Tovia, who was a servant, who was an Ammoni servant, they heard what was going on. They heard that Nehemia was on his way to Israel in order to rebuild the wall properly, to help shore it up. Vayera lahem ra'a gidola. They were really upset that he was coming. Because there was someone coming to help and improve the situation for the Jews. And I say for the 100 millionth time, this is the reason you learn Navi. Because whatever happened a couple thousand years ago gets replicated generation after generation after generation. Every generation we have people who wanted to destroy us. Every generation we have people who don't like it when things are good for the Jews. And when things are bad for the Jews, God forbid, you have a lot of happy people. And when things are good for the Jews, you have a lot of people trying to make the Jews' lives miserable. Nothing has changed for centuries. V'avol Yerushalayim, Yud Aleph, 11. V'avol Yerushalayim, and I came to Yerushalayim, v'ehi sham yamim shlosha, and I arrived there, and I was there for 3 days. So in other words, it looks like he arrives, and he kind of has to settle in. He has what we call jet lag, it's horse lag, whatever it is, and he settles down for 3 days, and then v'akum laila, Yud Bet 12. V'akum laila, I got up at night. Ani v'anashim me'at imi. I went with a few men. I told absolutely no one. Ma Elohai notena libi. What God had put into my heart, lasot Yerushalayim, to do on behalf of Yerushalayim. Uvehema eni mi. I didn't even have any animals with me. Kima behema shani ocheba. Only the animal I was riding on. So again, leaving some open-ended questions here. Why is he doing something in secret? Why is he going with no animals? Who does he take with him? Why is it just a few people? Why is it such a secret? Maybe because his son Balat and this other guy? Maybe. But what's he going to do? I went to Shar Hagai by night. We're going to see what that is. And then I went towards the spring of the jackals. And I went near the dung gate. Now, the Shara Ashpot that we know, the Shara Ashpot he's talking about cannot be the same thing, obviously. Why do I say obviously? Because the wall around the old city is a new wall. The wall is only about 500 plus years old. We're talking a couple thousand years ago. So this is not the same Shara Ashpot. which is the dung gate. Va'ahi shover b'chomot Yerushalayim asher hem perutzim v'ushareh uplu va'esh. And I looked at the walls. I guess the more proper was to survey, to look over, to inspect the walls of Yerushalayim that were breached and its gates that were consumed by fire. Now, in this pasuk, you're going to notice a very interesting ktiv and kri. Ktiv and kri is, again, when you have a word written one way and it's read a different way. Here, it's actually written and read the same way, but it's something strange about it. You'll notice the word hem, hey, mem, has a regular mem, not a mem sofit. So what's going on there? Why is it ended like that? We'll come back to that. And I then went to the fountain gate, and to the king's pool. And there was no room even for the animal for under me to continue. It was evidently a very narrow passage he's going through. I went up some Nachal, a river, by night. I was checking out the wall. Now, the word shover also means to break. So what do you mean he was breaking the wall? Is that what it really means? Maybe. But why, if he's coming to inspect the wall, why is he breaking the wall? So either he's surveying it, or he's breaking some part of the wall, or he's doing both. And then I went in by the Shar Hagai, and then I went back. And the people, not even like the seconds in command, the other people that were with him, they didn't know where I went, umani said, nor what I did. To no one, to anybody else, to the Kohanim, to the nobles, to the Sganim, to the people, other officials, I said nothing. He kept his mouth shut. This here. And I said to them, you see what a bad situation we're in. Yerushalayim lies in ruins. And its gates are burnt down, are destroyed by fire. Let us go and rebuild the wall of Yerushalayim. There should be no more disgrace. Why is it a disgrace? Well, kind of obvious, but we'll get into that. Why is it disgraceful? We already talked about it a little bit in Perek Aleph. I also told them of Hashem's watching over me. And I told them also about what the king said to me. And they said, Nakum uvaninu the first thing they responded with is, let us get up and start this building. And they were encouraged by the Hashem's giving, Hashem's tovah that he gave to them. Contrast that with I don't know if it's a good place to make the contrast or not, but when the spies came back from checking out the land, they said it's a good land, but it's Eretz Ochelet Yoshveh, it's got all these problems, and the people just said, forget it, we can't do it. It's not going to happen. Here, they said that the land is laying in ruins, the problem with the wall, they could have said, let's just go back to Persia, life is pretty good there. They don't. The first thing response is, Nakum uvanim, let's get up and let's rebuild it. Now we had a third person. In addition to the other two we mentioned, now there's a new guy named Geshem, the Arab guy. And they mocked us. And they were, I guess they held us in contempt. What is it you're doing here? Are you trying to rebel against the king? Now, the question is, are we to understand that he is seriously concerned with the welfare of the king and his kingdom and worried that there's this rebellion that's going to take place? Or is that just a ruse? Is it a ruse to say, you stinking Jews, we don't want you doing anything to help yourselves? Don't know. We might have to wait and see. Last pasuk of the parak. Vasita otam davar. I said to them, Va'omar lehem Elokei hashamayim. Hu yatzliach lanu. Hashem will give us success. V'anachnu avadav nakumu v'aninu. And we, his servants, will get up. We will build lachem, and to you, and chedek u'tzedakah v'zikaron b'Yerushalayim. You have no memory, no part whatsoever, no share or stake in Yerushalayim. It's a pretty strong statement. Let's put it into modern terms for a moment, which is, again, I like doing that because it helps us understand how Navi it remains so eternal. It could be on any hilltop in the Shomron, somewhere in Yehuda. It could be in Ra'anana. It can be in any Daled Amot in the land of Israel. And you have people that say, from our own, I'm not even talking about the non-Jewish world, I'm talking our own. What are you doing here? What do you need to do this for? We want peace. We want peace. Oh, we want peace because we want, we don't need all this problems. Let's make Gudan Shemon Yudenrein free of Jews, and the whole world will be so happy, and the world will be singing Kumbaya. The response from some within the political world is, it's not a bad idea. Others who have their heads screwed on right is be this last pasuk. Hashem's going to help us. We're going to build, and you have no stake and claim whatsoever to the land. Nothing changes. Whether it's going against the EU, Yamach Shemam, it's going against the EU or going against the United Nations or going against what they're united against the Jews, anything else. I try usually to leave my political perspective out of this, but this one's just so on point with this chapter. It's just current events. So now we've done all that. Let's go back and we'll do a screen share and look at a couple things that we started talking about before. Why was it? We saw last week that that the time frame, the beginning of the book of Nehemia starts in the month of Kislev, the 20th year of the rule of the king. We know who's now is Artaxerxes. He's in Shushan Abira in Persia, modern day Iraq. And he's davening to God and all these things. But when does actually the story begin, where there's a conversation with the king in the beginning of chapter 2? Nisan. So he went from Kislev, Tevet, Shvat, Adar, Nisan, months before anything really happens. So I'm going to give you two perspectives as to why all this time has passed. First of all, this is the perspective of the Dat Sofrim. B'chol ofen, avru chodashim achadim al Nehemia, lachar tzilmo utfilato. Remember, we talked about last week that what he did when he heard about the terrible situation Jerusalem was in. He fasted, he davened. He says a number of months went by after his fasts and after his prayers. In the meantime, he was unable to do anything. You can assume. During this time period, he got more information about what was actually happening in the land of Israel. That at the time, from the time the first person came, whose name was Hanani, if you remember correctly, if I remember correctly, which I believe I do. Let's see, Hanani, and told him he's not relying only on this one person. In the meantime, he's basically gathering more information because, as you all know, the idea of of military intelligence, reporting information, forget the internet, forget all that business, just reporting. There can be things that are embellished. There can be things that are made to sound even less than problematic than they may actually be. So it seems, at least according to the Dat Sofrim, the only reason that there's this lag time of a few months between the time Nehemiah hears about what's going on in Israel to our action begins of him setting out to Israel is he wanted to make sure that he was going on a mission that was going to be purpose, and that it wasn't being given to him fake news. He wasn't being given something that was blown out of proportion. And there was a little stone missing from wall, and all of a sudden this man Hanani's come, oh my God, the whole world's caving in. But there's another possibility here. So get it on my screen here. It's not, you don't see it on my screen, right? Word document, you don't see it. Just shake your head, correct? Good. Okay. It's just some notes I wrote for myself here. There's another possibility as to why Nehemiah waits these few months before making the request. We know he already davened Hashem. And then when the request comes, as I mentioned when we were rereading the chapter, it's not like it was planned for him to make the request of the king. It's only after the king asks what's going on, and then he has no choice. Then he has no choice at that point. So why does he wait all this time? So there is from the Gush, there's an online Beit Midrash, and this one Rav there, I think I have his name written down. Let me see, because I should give him credit. Hold on. No, I have to look it up. Who I read some of his stuff sometimes. He has the following understanding as to why he is waiting this amount of time before he actually gives his response. He says, this Rav, and I apologize, I forgot his name right now. He says it was anxiety. What was the anxiety? He has no idea what the request might provoke in the king. He was even afraid maybe that his life could be on the line because, you know, we're used to supposed freedom, where if we want to get on an airplane and go to Cyprus, we want to go to Honolulu, we want to go to Eilat, you want to go to the Golan Heights, you go. You don't have to, other than making sure it's okay with your family or your job, you go. But here we're talking about not only does he have to ask the king's permission, he's also very close to the king. He serves a very high function for the king. And therefore, he was afraid that it could be misinterpreted, which evidently it was when he has this dour face. And we know because he accuses him essentially of maybe plotting to kill the king. Who knows what was on his mind. But despite this fears, when he does make the request, when he's asked by the king what's wrong, then suddenly he becomes very politically astute. He really has his head on right. What does he do? The first thing, of course, is he says, "Long live the king." Why is that politically important? He was always in the king's presence. He was his wine steward. He was his butler. He was his Sar HaMashkin. His familiarity with the king was such that he probably was able to enter and exit the room almost at will, and for sure when the king called him, but he had a very close relationship to the king. And yet now, all of a sudden, he stands up and says, "Long live the king." And if it pleases the king, if I found favor in your eyes, he's putting this as a personal request. He wants the king to buy, and he can't just start off by saying, by the way, Esther Hamalkah did the same thing. She says that it is my people, it is my this, it is my people that are having trouble. And if it finds favor in the king's eyes, I need to have him to rescind this order. When a person wants to make a difficult request from another individual, forget kings and queens and all that stuff. If you have something to say to somebody else that's difficult to say, one of the ways to do that is to make sure that other person hears you and sees it as a personal issue. You're not asking for some grand ideas. Like, he doesn't just walk in. The king says to him, "Look, what's wrong with you?" He said, "Listen, my dear king, I need to go to Jerusalem. Something's really wrong with the walls there. I got to go help fix them." He doesn't go that route at all. He first ingratiates himself with the king. He wants to avoid the impression that he's trying to build this independent society, to build this independent subdivision within the king's realm. And the king therefore asks him, "Give me a very specific, concrete time frame by when you're going to go back." And after he sees the king is receptive, and only then does he ask for letters. Only then does he ask for permission also for a letter for the wood to be given to him. And not only that, the king is so receptive, he didn't ask for, but he received accompanying officers. He had people that went with him. So according to this Rav in the Gush, and again, I have to look up his name, his delay had nothing to do originally with necessarily getting more information, although it's possible, but just this trepidation or anxiety, which begs the question, he talked to Hashem, so to speak, and it would seem that he was at peace with that. So, okay, that's fine. But let's move on to the next slide. Oh, here, I wrote it down. Rav Tzvi Sinensky from the Gush. Okay, very good. Now, here I cut and pasted some information from different Mefarshim into English about what we talked about. It said that the king was sitting next to the Shegal. That was in Pasuk, and it's not Mark Shagal, Shin Gut Gimel Lamed. That's in Pasuk Vav. It's a very unusual word. It's actually used in the Torah as well. It's one of those words that's written one way, but it's read with a completely different word. That's fine. But I'm just going to read this off to you. He says, who was this woman? The Ibn Ezra and Rambam read the word as alluding to sexual behavior, meaning her role was primarily to be available for physical intimacy. By the way, that would definitely be supported by the pasuk in the Torah where it's used. It says ish acher. Instead of we read it as yishkavena, it's written yishkalena, if I remember the right word, but it would be definitely supported by the Torah. Rashi and Sudat David say it seems to maintain that shegal is a term for the queen. It's just another word. Oops, just another word for the queen. Let me move down here. The Dat Mikra notes that in Assyrian, the shegal is the primary queen. Okay, and then you say, oh, wait a minute, why would they use a word from another language? It's not another language. It's a language that's it's being used by the Jews, Aramaic, Assyrian connection to it. Malbim says a completely different perspective. Following Chazal's view that Esther was Artaxerxes' mother. Okay, listen to this. The king now is Artaxerxes. That's what we're talking about. The Chazal say that Esther HaMalka is his mother. So the Malbim suggests that the shegal was none other than Esther herself. That's a pretty shocking idea. Due to her love for her people, Esther was instrumental in swaying the king to respond positively to Nehemiah's sensitive request. Needless to say, this interpretation is highly innovative and is inconsistent with the scholarly chronology. This brings us back to the beginning of Sefer Ezra, when we talked about the chronology of the Jewish people, chronology of scholars, and other timelines. And I see Arnold was on who talked about that quite a bit at length back then. So it doesn't fit necessarily with a lot of the history that we know and the timeline we know. Interesting idea, potentially, at least the connections, but don't know for sure. Next, in this pasuk, in pasuk number 8, we said at the end of the pasuk, after he asks for his letters, both for the to show in the governors and to ask for wood to rebuild the house and to rebuild the wall, the fortress, the fortifications. It says, "Vayiten li hamelech." The king gave to me. Hamelech noheg benidivut lev klape Nehemia kmo klape Ezra. One of the things we said when we started learning Nehemia, that there are definite parallels between Ezra and Nehemia. This is one of them. That the king, back then was Koresh, the king acts with tremendous amount of open heart and giving when it came to Ezra, and also now we see according to Nehemia. Kamor Sham, as it says there, says that the result, the reason was there was so giving back then in Sefer Ezra, had also to do with the result of the downfall of Haman and the people who were Nafal Pachad Mordechai Alehem. The history followed them, obviously, and they knew of Mordechai, they knew of the fall of Haman, and the people were afraid of the Jews in a sense. Artaxerxes Yazeh Yada Yafe al Ma'amada Shel Esther Im HaMelech HaTzair, Im HaMelech HaTzair, and he knew very well the status of Esther, the weight she carried, and he understood that he needed to King Artaxerxes to do something positive for the Jews at this point. Imamur kan ayash b'shnat 20 לדריווש, בוודאי כבר לא היה אתה חזק הרושם כמו שהיה אז, אבל הדברים התנהלו בסיוע אלוקי מיוחד כלהלן. Even though the story and the impact of the whole story of Esther and Mordechai and Haman was at least 20 years ago, nevertheless, there was still some impact, helped along with the involvement of Hashem. Now, what does that mean, that the impact is worn off? Every one of you knows, it's maybe not a great example, but it's one popped into my head. Every one of you knows exactly where you were when you heard about the first airplane hitting the first tower. You knew where you were when you either heard or maybe even saw live on TV or in person the second tower getting smashed and them crashing down. The impact of that event, and I can tell you that I was in my second year as rabbi in the shul and had to deal not only with my own family, but my shul family as well. It took me a very long time to get, you don't get over that, but to get back to almost some sense of normalcy psychologically and physically. And the impact lasted a very long time for me personally. This year, it's going to be September 11th soon, Bezrat Hashem, and it will not affect me that day as much as it did in 2002 and 2003, maybe even 2004. It's still powerful. It's still strong. I still can't watch the videos. I sometimes go back on the left, September 11th and watch them, but I can't really watch it because it brings you back to a bad place. But the impact is still there, not as strong as the day it happened. Same thing is over here. The impact on the leadership of Persia is still very strong, and on the people of Persia, of what happened in the time of Mordechai and Esther and Haman, but not to the same extent as it was when it first happened. And it was because of Hashem's siyua, his help, his assistance, and that's obviously in everything. It made it even more bolet. Okay. Let's talk for a moment about Sanballat. Right? It says, "Vayishma Sanballat hachoron," in pasuk Yod, number 10. So, sorry, this is a little bit tushtash, a little bit blurry, unless it's my eyes. Here's his commentary. Who is Sanballat? Miu Sanballat zelo ne'emar. It doesn't tell us who this man Sanballat was. He's also mentioned a little later on, pasuk Yutet, which we saw. Pamim achadot, as another in another few other times, as one of the greatest haters of the Jews. But also, evidently, he had some partners in Yerushalayim, as we see in Perek Vav, Pasuk Yud Zayin Yud Chet, which we'll get to. Even the people, the times of the Talmud, did not exactly know. Was he one of those people who came from Bavel originally at the time of Ezra, who were one of the psulim, one of the people who were not, who had defects, problems, whether yichus, who did have the, who succeeded in connecting himself to the Jewish people, maybe he was one of the Jews, maybe Sanballat actually was a survivor of the Churban, Jewish, who lived in Yerushalayim, still, and now he reconnected with those who came from Bavel. Even though his yichus, his lineage, was not clear, nevertheless, in any case, he needed to act in a deceptive way. He was not someone who was a well-known figure, but someone who wanted to cause the Jews problems. And he needed to act in with a way of wisdom to make his trickery, make his goals come to fruition. There's a pasuk in, I believe it's Yeshayahu. If I'm wrong, I'll look it up and I'll tell you, but I think it is. Meharsaich macharivayich yimech yitzeu. Your destroyers, those who seek out your destruction, will come from among you. Basically meaning, and has been true throughout history, ad hayom hazeh, till this very day, some of our worst enemies are our fellow Jews who want to destroy the Jewish people. I'm sure many of you are familiar with the neighborhood known as Shimon HaTzadik, the Arabic name of Sheikh Jarrah. My son-in-law and daughter lived there. They moved in there right after they got married back in November, Baruch Hashem. And somehow my son-in-law became the go-to person in charge of security in the area. Every single Friday, anytime they come to us for Shabbat, they come really right at the very last minute. Why? Not because they're late people, but because every Friday in Shimon HaTzadik, there's a group of left-wing Jews that come, not Arabs, left-wing Jews that come there to protest the Jews' occupation of Shimon HaTzadik, and they should all leave because that is obviously the world's biggest problem, and that there's only thing we're missing in the world for peace is these Jews that live in Shimon HaTzadik. Is the same thing if we say Sanballat was Jewish, potentially. We see it in the Middle Ages. We see it with Pablo Cristiani, who was a Jew, was an apostate, who was the one who was responsible for many Jews being murdered for standing up for believing that Christianity, the Jews wanted to destroy Christianity, and that they Nothing new under the sun, as Shlomo HaMelech tells us, Kohelet, En Kol Chadash Tachat HaShamash. Okay, so we got up to Pasuk Yud Aleph in our review now for further and deeper information. We'll pick it up as I just want to take a look and make sure, because I told you before I've had, Baruch Hashem, lots of smachot coming up. Just want to take a quick look at next Sunday. As of now, Bezrat Hashem, it should be okay. We'll get together again, Bezrat Hashem, next Sunday night and continue with Pasuk Yud Aleph. In the meantime, I wish I would have Shavua Tov. It should be a Chodesh Tov. Month of Elul, lots to say about that, but obviously not tonight. And have a wonderful evening, everybody. Be well.
Thank you, Rabbi.